It's pretty well known that the largest ship to be sunk in the First World War was the Titanic's younger and slightly larger sister ship, the Britannic. What's much less well known is that the second largest ship to be sunk was the SS Justicia, and that's what I'm going to be diving today. Hi, this is Dom Robinson, and welcome to my Deep Wreck Diver channel. As always with my videos, I'm going to make sure you get the history of the wreck. I'm also going to make sure you understand the layout. But what I've also got on this dive is an explanation of how it sits in the context of the first dive of a deep expedition week. And as you can see here, what we're doing is practicing a deep bailout. Now, at this point it looks pretty good, but you're going to see towards the end of the video that this drill didn't go entirely as we hoped. Anyway, more of that later. This was a 2022 GozTech expedition to Malin Head, and this is a core group of us, although we were also joined by some equally disreputable friends from both the UK and Ireland. For those who have no idea where Malin Head is, then it's on the very northwest coast of the Republic of Ireland and is pretty well known as one of the finest locations for wreck diving in the world. We were fortunate enough to be able to use Laura Dean, which is an outstanding boat and one that I've used on a number of previous trips. The aim of this expedition was to go and dive the deeper wrecks. The standard Malin itinerary is what they call the classics, and these are brilliant wrecks, all in the 60 to 70 metre range. Now, we'd done those, so the aim of this trip was to try and get to some of the much deeper ones. Although we were all well dived up, we felt that we needed to do a bit of progression, so we thought we'd start off with one of the classics, and that's why we're here on the Justicia, which is about 68, 69 metres. Now, the more observant of you will notice that most of my videos normally start off with me in the descent, and I'm not doing that on this dive. It's straight onto the bottom. Now, the reason isn't that I don't want to show you the descent. The reason is, at this point, I was having loads of issues with my my video cameras. This is the old Paralens dive camera, and it was mounted on my mask. And for whatever reason, it occasionally wouldn't turn on during the dive. So this one, at the bottom of the dive, I got my buddy to check, and it hadn't been turned on, so I got him to turn it on. And that's why the video for this dive starts with me on the bottom. So let's talk about the history of the Justicia. And you've got to say, first of all, that it's got some fantastic links with the most famous shipwreck in the world, which is obviously the Titanic. So the link with the Titanic, the first one is that Justicia was built on the same slipway. So they launched the Titanic. The next ship they built was the Justicia. Now, when they built it, it wasn't called the Justicia. It was called the Statendam. I think that's probably how you pronounce it. Now, I'm going to come back to this in a minute, and the reason is because, as you can see on the dive there, with my torch, I'm highlighting those beautiful brass windows. Now, they are absolutely massive. They're portholes. I guess they would have been in the cabins of the ship. And the really fascinating things about them is they pull out and then rotate through 90 degrees. Absolutely incredible things. I've seen one on the surface, actually as part of a guy's house. Don't know how it got there, but it's an incredible thing. Now, I'm also, as you can see here, I'm having a look. There's some other stuff that I'm just kind of pulling out there. Now, one of the things with the Justicia is it is absolutely smashed to smithereens. So the only bit of it that stands above the seabed are the actual boilers and bits of the engine and the very, very famous bow, which we're going to come back to later on. And you've already seen one of the photos at the beginning of this video. So moving back to the Statendam. So it was being built before the start of the First World War for the Holland America Line, but when the First World War kicked off, they agreed to let the United Kingdom have the ship, and we renamed it as the Justicia. It was being used as a transport, primarily to bring troops over from America in 1918, when it was spotted by a German submarine. And you can imagine, this ship is 225 metres long. It is Absolutely massive. Anyway, she was being escorted as she headed from Belfast, obviously where she was built, over to New York, and she was escorted by destroyers when she was spotted by the UB-64, which fired a torpedo at her and hit her. The Justicia developed a list, but, and this is another great Titanic link, unlike the Titanic, the watertight doors were closed in time and she was kept afloat. The UB-64 continued to fire torpedoes at the Justicia, and this just shows how big a ship it was, because the gunner, I think it fired 5 torpedoes in total, 2 hit, 2 of them were destroyed by the gunners on board the Justicia, and 1 of them missed, but it didn't sink. So the Justicia was being taken in tow by a tug called the Sonia. The Sonia was taking the Justicia back to Loch Swilly. The UB-64, realising it hadn't sunk the Justicia, put out a radio message, and this was heard by the UB-124, which fired a load more torpedoes at her, hitting her amidships with 2, killing a number of the engine crew, and eventually causing the Justicia to roll onto her starboard side and sink. The Royal Navy, who had 3 destroyers in the area, weren't very impressed by this, so they sent the destroyers after the UB-124, depth charged her, got her to the surface, and then sank her by gunfire. However, the damage was done, and the German press celebrated this achievement. Now, going back to the dive here, you can see that I've reached the shot line. You can see there's some divers on it. You can see there, that's my buddy, Nick, and I'm going to come back to him in a minute. You've also seen the boilers there, and there's a huge number of boilers on the Justicia, rows on rows of them. This was such a big wreck. It needed them to keep the massive engines supplied with steam and provide the power to move the ship forward. Now, although I've come back to the boilers and come back to the shot, I don't actually want to be here, so Nick and me, we're scootering off to see more of the wreck. Now, while we're doing that, I just want to talk to you about some of the challenges with running deep expeditions. And one of the challenges is always people. It's one of those things, you need to make an expedition work. You need to have the right number of people on the boat because it's all about the money. So you need to fill up every space on the boat. You're going to be going out a long way. These are expensive dives. If you've got spare places on the boat, that cost for that spare place is going to be divided up amongst everyone else. So when we were planning this trip, we had our 10 divers for the trip. They were all sorted. Then, and I'd taken deposits off them and all that kind of stuff. And then with about a few weeks to go, one of the guys had to drop out for personal reasons. Now, at this point, it was a real conundrum. What did we do? So I was really determined to try and recruit somebody else. But, you know, we were going to be doing 120, 130 metres. So there's only a relatively limited number of people who are capable of doing those kind of depths. And to get somebody at short notice was always going to be really difficult. So I did what any sensible person would do. I stuck it on social media. I put it out on Facebook and said, we've got this trip. Would anybody like to come along? And I wasn't really expecting to get much of a response. But Nick got in touch with me and said, yeah, I'd love to come. And I was like, right, okay. And then there's this kind of conundrum because you have to make a decision. You know, this is a team game. What's Nick going to be like? Nobody knew him. He wasn't recommended by anybody. So I said to him, fine, but I want to speak to you first. So I then conducted what can only be described as an interview over the phone, and I got to understand more about him, and then I had to make a judgment about whether I thought he was the sort of person who could be capable of doing this kind of diving. So now, as it turned out, he absolutely can. Nick is a great bloke. He was brilliant on this trip. I've done loads and loads of diving with him. Now, the other thing I would say is Nick is also a CCR instructor, and the famous advice for choosing an instructor is to choose an instructor who does the kind of diving that you want to do. And Nick does this kind of diving. So if you are wanting to learn to be a CCR diver. He teaches on the Inspiration, so if you want to learn how to dive on an Inspiration, then I highly recommend Nick. He's based in the kind of middle of the country, so you know, if that's your thing, I strongly advise you to get in touch with him. Anyway, so there's Nick, and this dive, this Justicia dive, was effectively a checkout dive for him as well. So it worked in a couple of different levels. It was, it's good for all of us. We were going to do some drills, and I'm going to come back to that in a moment. It was also the opportunity for me to see what Nick was like in the water, and he absolutely aced it. I'm sure he was probably also doing the same thing as well, making sure that he hadn't ended up with a bunch of cowboys or buffoons or whatever. So I haven't really talked that much about the dive. I've talked about loads of stuff around the dive, but anyway, you can see I've been away. I've come back to the boilers. One of the things, unfortunately, I don't have any video of is the bow of the Justicia. Now, it is by far and away the best bit of the wreck. Anybody who's seen photos of the Justicia will have seen the famous bow shot photos. It stands upright, although quite a lot of it is buried in the sand. It is leaning over to the port side, and that lean is slowly getting worse. Even in my time diving it, I've seen it go further and further over, and I'm sure it won't be too long until it collapses to the seabed. So if you want to see it, my top tip is don't wait. But the Justicia is a brilliant dive, deserves all the plaudits. I mean, you've seen here, there's just so much of it. There's stuff all over the place. Here I am in and around the boilers and the engine area. And there's a ton of different stuff. I mean, there's bits and pieces all over it. You've seen those massive bronze windows. You've seen the huge boilers. You've seen the bollards. You know, there's just all sorts of bits and pieces, as you would expect from a wreck that is so big. So you might ask, how come it is so badly deteriorated? I mean, you compare this to something like the Britannic, for instance, which is also on its side and is, you know, almost completely intact. Oh, I think here, this is me. This looks in and around the engines here. You can see the engine has collapsed over. That's the engine stands. And I think the pistons and stuff are off over to the right-hand side here. You can see various bits of crankshaft and all that kind of stuff. So why is it collapsed over? Now, there is a study done on it as part of a TV program. I think what it says is that the wreck landed on its port side. And then what happened, this looks like a condenser here, I would guess, or maybe the inside of a boiler. And then what happened is it was leaning over to the side on the sand. Then the sand got washed away, and the strong currents that are in this area gradually pushed the superstructure off the side of it, and then it kind of slowly collapsed down onto the seabed. I mean, the other thing that may have been problematic is I suspect in the Second World War this would have been depth charged a lot as well. It was quite common for the as part of the anti-submarine campaign. Oh, there you go. Look, you can see the engine there. Really, one of the engines. It's really obvious there, off to the left-hand side. You can see the pistons, and you can see the cylinder heads and all those kind of things. I've given Nick the turnaround, so I think we're starting to head back towards the shot now. But yeah, so I suspect this was depth charged quite a lot as well, and that probably accounts for quite a lot of the destruction. So just coming back to the boilers now, it had 12 of these Scotch boilers, 2 engines, and a steam turbine, all driving 3 props. Now, I don't visit the props on this dive, but I have been to them before, and as you would expect, they're just unbelievable things. Now, at this period in my diving, I carried both a stills camera and the video that's on the side of my head. Mainly, I was taking stills photos, and the great thing about the Justicia, and in fact all of the Malin wrecks, as you can see down here, this is 70 metres. The visibility is wonderful. You can see there's a whole load of ambient light up in front of me there with the yellow fins and the yellow box. That's Nick. One of the unusual things about him, not unusual, maybe interesting things about him, is unlike most of us who dive in Inspiration with an aftermarket box, such as a G-box, Nick dives it in absolutely standard configuration. And the reason he does that is because he says, that's what he teaches in. That's what he teaches people to dive. So he thinks it's the right thing to do. And have to say, fair play to him. That is a good call. And his yellow fins, obviously great as well. A lot like my yellow gloves. They stand out really well, and you can never miss him. Lots of people think that all diving gear has to be black. Actually, on this kind of stuff, it's really good to have high visibility equipment. It just makes such a difference if you're looking around for somebody. What I thought I should probably do is, for anybody who's interested in learning to dive with Nick, I've put a link up in the sort of the top right-hand corner of this, so you can get onto his website if you're interested. Does all sorts of stuff. He's a PADI course director, runs trips, as well as doing all the CCR training. So clearly, he's a talented instructor. Does loads of stuff. I recommend him really highly. Right. Back onto the dive. There we go. You can see the boilers with some condensers in front of them. There's bigger boilers, little boilers. As you can see, they're completely exposed in the wreck. Whenever I see something like this, I think about the amount of coal that must have been consumed, the amount of people who were required to keep these things running. Just really. Even though the Justice is flat, something like this just gives you an understanding of the scale of the ship. You probably saw there that I gave Nick the thumbs up. So our dive bottom time is coming to an end. Our dive certainly isn't done. We've got a whole load of deco, and I'm going to talk a bit more about that in a bit. But this is an interesting bit of the dive, and I mentioned this at the beginning. So, only a single strobe. I hadn't gone on to double strobes at this point. But this is one of the interesting bits about this dive, is that we agreed that we were going to do a simulated call for gas. So we were going to practice our emergency procedure. We were going off to do all this deeper diving. We're going to do this 120, 130 metre diving. So we wanted to be sure that our call for gas procedure worked. So what we'd done is we'd agreed with the skipper what would happen at the end of this dive. So I was the last in on the dive, and therefore what I determined is that I would be the person who released the lazy shot. If you want to know what a lazy shot is, I've put a link to my video in the top right hand corner as well, so you can go and find a bit more about it there. But yeah, once I released the lazy shot, I knew that all the divers were on the lazy shot. What we were then going to do is test the call for gas procedure. We had 3 cylinders on the boat. We had a cylinder that could be breathed at 50 metres. We had a cylinder, in fact, I think we had 2 cylinders that could be breathed at 20 metres, so they were 50% mixes. We had a cylinder that could be breathed at 9 metres, which was an 80% nitrox mixture. And we had a cylinder that could be breathed at 6 metres, which was 100% oxygen. So those 5 cylinders were all on a line. So I was going to get back to the lazy shot, and you're going to see me do this in a minute. Once I'd released the lazy shot, I was going to deploy my delayed SMB, and then the signal for deploying all that gas would be for me to put up another yellow DSMB alongside my orange DSMB, and that was a signal to the boat that they could put the gas in. So you're going to see all of that happen in a bit. In fact, you can just see I'm just coming up to the lazy shot. Now, I'm not quite the last Nick and myself are not quite the last pair of divers off the wreck. In front of me there is another diver. That's James. He also features in quite a lot of my videos. If you haven't seen my bailout one, he's one of the Jameses that appears in there. You can see he's diving an ex-CCR, and he does like to wear that orange hood, which does stand out really well and makes him really distinctive. So Nick off to my left-hand side, James in front of me. James has taken his tag, and when I come up here, you'll see there's only 2 tags left on the lazy shot. Nick is going to take off his, and then I'm going to take off mine. So we know there are no more divers left on the wreck, and that means that we can carry out the call for gas procedure, knowing that if anybody actually needs it for real, then we've got the gas, because I'm going to attach it to the lazy shot, and you'll see me do that in a minute when it comes in. So the lazy shot has been released there, and we're now drifting in the currents. Before I do the call for gas procedure, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to crank up my PO2 of oxygen. So you can actually see me doing this. You don't often get to see me doing this on many of my videos, but you can see there I'm changing the high set point to 1.5 bar PO2, which will accelerate my deco. Later on in the video, I'm going to put my deco profile onto the video, so you'll see the benefit of this of me doing this. It does accelerate my deco. Takes about 10 minutes off, and you can see. So I've changed it on my the computer on my left-hand screen, left-hand wrist rather, which is the controller for the rebreather. I've just done it there on my right-hand computer, which is my shear water, which is not linked to my rebreather, so I have to tell the shear water what PO2 I'm breathing, and it calculates my deco using that. So I've sorted all those things out. I've accelerated my deco. So the next item on the agenda very shortly is going to be to deploy my delayed S&B. I'm going to be the only diver who does this. I'm going to put up that delayed S&B, and I'm going to then put the yellow call for gas. Now, we have pre-briefed this with the skipper. He knows that this procedure is going to happen. He knows why we're doing it. So he is prepared. It's not something we're doing on the fly. It's all agreed and planned, and in order that we can practice the procedure, so that if later on in the trip we need to do it for real, everybody has seen it done. The skipper's had a go at doing it. We'd provided all the cylinders. We'd provided the rope. We'd provided all that kind of stuff. So the skipper has had an opportunity to do it. So if anything goes wrong on this practice, it doesn't matter. And the reason it doesn't matter is because everybody is safe. Everybody is on the lazy shot and drifting in the currents. So it's a great thing to do at the beginning of a deep X-bed like this, is if you do have really important safety procedures, you practice them so that everybody is happy and everybody knows how it's going to work. Now you can see here what I'm doing is I'm filling up my delayed S&B. I'm using the auto air that's attached on my rebreather. It does function as a second stage. Now, not all rebreathers have these. It is a feature on the Inspiration. Lots of people don't particularly like them. Personally, I'm a big fan. One of the reasons I'm a big fan is you can breathe off it. Second reason I'm a big fan is because you can do exactly what I've done there. You can use it to fill things up like delayed S&Bs. Obviously, everybody's got their own favourite type of delayed S&B. That is the AP diving one there. It's a really big delayed S&B. Doesn't get missed on the surface. Also, has got a fairly significant lifting capacity as well. So, you can use it as part if you ever needed to for buoyancy for whatever reason. Now, the other thing I'm doing here is you've probably seen as part of my delayed S&B rig, I also have the yellow one attached to it. And the yellow is I've just clipped it on the line there, and the next item on the agenda is going to be to inflate it. Now I've just tried to pull the CO2 cartridge. I'm just trying to pull the CO2 cartridge, and you see it doesn't work. Now it's going to take me a while to realise that I always slightly unscrew the CO2 cartridge, and the reason I do that is so if the toggle gets pulled accidentally, then this delayed S&B won't go off. But I guess I don't really do that maybe as often as I should have, so I've slightly forgotten that. So what I'm going to do now is in a bit I'm just going to remember that what I need to do is screw it in a bit more, and then when I screw it in a bit more, it's all going to work fine, and it's going to head up to the surface. So useful lesson for me there, useful reminder, and it shows I think one of the reasons why you should always practice using all your gear. Even if it's stuff that you're only planning, well, definitely if it's stuff you're planning on using in an emergency, these kinds of things need to be second nature to you. And for those of you who've seen my deep bailout video, you will see I definitely don't have this problem on that dive. Potentially it's because I remember it from this dive, which was, I guess, 2 years before, and therefore I'd practiced it, so I was entirely confident I'd be okay. Now, what you can see here is I'm actually letting quite a lot of line out of my reel, and the reason I'm letting quite a lot of line out is because I know the boat is going to come up alongside it at some point. It's quite a big boat. It's quite difficult for them to manoeuvre Laura Dean, and therefore what I don't want is to start being dragged around by Laura Dean when they try and they're going to have to pull my delayed S&B up out of the water. Then they're going to have to clip all those other cylinders on it. Then they're going to chuck all those cylinders in the water. While they're doing that, they're going to be moving up and down with the waves. And what I don't want is to be being pulled up and down as that's happening. So as you can see there, that's the reason it looks a bit of a mess on my reel. I'm not. It's not normally like that. So please, don't think that that's been done anything other than deliberately. So it's going to take a bit of a while for this to happen. I know that the boat's going to see the yellow delayed S&B. It's then going to manoeuvre in position. The crew on the boat is going to need to lean over the side. Is going to need to grab it. They're then going to need to get all their cylinders on, and then they're going to need to deploy it. So realistically, you're probably talking, 5 odd minutes for that. So while that's happening, I'm just sitting here. You can see the other divers on the lazy shot. There's a few above me there. That's James, who's about the same sort of depth as me. Nick is a bit above me, and as you can see, he's been quite attentive. I think he's obviously, we're all interested to see if this procedure works. He's also been a good buddy. He probably thinks he's still under exam situation, so he's been really good. So and now it's just a case of waiting. So fast forward now by a couple of minutes, and when you're doing this, you can always feel that there's something happening on the surface. So you can feel something going on, and I could feel this happening, and now you can see that I can see the gas coming down. There's the deep cylinder. That's the 50-meter cylinder. So I must be, 40 odd meters, I guess. And you can see there's a clip on the end of the line. Now, what we agreed is that as soon as the gas would come down, I would attach this to the lazy shot. Now, one of the interesting things you might see is that the lazy shot's actually it's actually a bit further away than it was to start with. And as I'm swimming towards it, you can probably see that, and you'll see as this goes on, is that actually it's getting quite difficult for me to get to the lazy shot. This is just some more of the rope coming down, by the way. So I must be probably 30-ish meters, I guess, here. So I'm finding it difficult to swim to the lazy shot, which is really odd because I should be travelling at the same speed as the lazy shot. It wasn't very far away, only 4 or 5 meters, so I should be able to swim to it. But I'm not able to get there. And this is, at this point in the dive, this is really confusing me. It's like, how come I can't get to the lazy shot? Why is the lazy shot moving? Now, the answer to this is that what's happened at this point is that the boat has managed to get itself onto one of the buoys from the trapeze. So above the lazy shot is a trapeze. Holding the trapeze up are 2 buoys, and the boat has managed to get one of those buoys wrapped around one of the propellers. So the boat has obviously killed the engine to stop or killed both engines actually to stop the trapeze getting any more wrapped around. But then what's happened is the wind is now pushing the boat, and because the wind is pushing the boat, it's also pushing the lazy shot, and it's pushing therefore the trapeze. So what's happening now is I'm trying to swim to catch up the lazy shot while the boat is pulling the lazy shot away from me. So this is really awkward and really challenging. I guess what I probably could have done at this point is get my scooter out. You can also see the end of the lazy shot is being pulled up there. And what happens, unfortunately, I don't have all of the video from what happens now on because my power lens stops recording in a couple of minutes' time. But you can see that the entire lazy shot system is being pulled along. And as we're getting pulled on, you will see divers, instead of going up the lazy shot, they're actually handing over hand down the lazy shot to stay at the right depth of the decompression. So this is really concerning. And obviously, it's going to get to a point where divers are going to have to abandon the lazy shot system, put up delayed SMBs, and just basically do their decompression under delayed SMBs. Now, fortunately, the skipper, and massive kudos to him, the skipper understands exactly what's going on, understands the importance of disentangling the lazy shot from, or the boys of the trapeze from his boat. And massive credit to him. What he actually does is gets in the water in his underpants and gets underneath the boat with a knife and cuts the buoy from one side of the trapeze system. So what that means is when we get to the trapeze is has only got one buoy. So one end of the trapeze is fine. The other end of the buoy, the other end of the trapeze is hanging vertically down. Unfortunately, I don't have that bit of video, which is a real pity, because it's a really fascinating thing to see. But it was also massively confusing. It wasn't until we got on the surface and were able to chat to the skipper that realised what was going on. But you can see here that I've the bottom of the lazy shot, which started off maybe 10 or 15 meters below me, has now come up to the same depth as me. And it's now moving away from me again, pulling all those cylinders and stuff. So it was a really, really odd experience to have. But, I mean, the good thing with it, of course, is that this is happening. Nobody needs the gas. Nobody's in trouble. It's all just a bit confusing. You see there, I've come up to one of the other divers, and we're all just really confused about what's going on. This isn't a scenario that you ever get taught. This isn't a scenario that I've ever heard of happening before. So it was one that we were all just kind of trying to deal with on the hoof. And that is diving. That's any kind of adventurous pursuit. You need to be able to cope with the unexpected. Now I'm fine. Obviously, I've got my delayed S&B up already. You can see another diver there. He's actually got off the lazy shot system already, and people were starting to deploy delayed S&Bs. And one of the important things in this kind of situation is if the group is going to be split and people are going to start deploying delayed S&Bs, what you really need to happen is everybody to deploy their delayed S&B at the same time, because what that will do is keep everybody in roughly the same place. If everyone's deployed it at the same time, then they're going to drift at the same rate. They're all going to end up in a similar position. So, unfortunately, this is the moment at which my power lens dies. So you won't be able to see what happens at the end. The good news, though, is that everybody survives. Everybody gets out the water. Everybody gets recovered onto the boat, and we all have a good chat about it. And it's a really good thing to talk about, and obviously really good learning point for the skipper who'd never actually done one of these for real. And I think I'm sure if he ever had to do it again, he would have taken away some important learning points from this. So I promised you my deco profile, and here it is. This is another download from the Shearwater Cloud desktop, which is absolutely brilliant if you want to review your dives afterwards. So you can see it took me about 6 minutes to get down. You can then see me going along various up and down bits. You can see towards the end of the dive, obviously I get shallower. This is me on top of the boilers and engine. And you can see I leave bottom there about 32, 33 minutes and head up pretty swiftly until I get to the point where I change my PO2. And you can see that saves me about 10 minutes of TTS. Goes from about 94 to 83. I then get up to my first deco stop at 30 odd meters. And you can see there the rest of the dive. Now, what it doesn't really show, of course, is that excitement of being dragged along through the water by the lazy shot being pulled by the boat. But what it does show is that I safely get out of the water with all my deco stops finished at 2.5 hours runtime. And of course, the most important part of this is everybody got to the surface okay. Everybody got back on the boat okay. And we just had a great story to tell. So I hope you've all enjoyed another one of my videos. As always, I hope you'll like, subscribe, give us a comment, turn on your notifications, all that sort of stuff. And yeah, so this is it from our diver Malin. Please have a look at some of my other videos, and I really hope I'll see you on the next one. Thank you.